About 600 feet above the forests of Sri Lanka sits Sigiriya, the Lion Rock, a place of both history and myth. With occupation of the site going back around 20,000 years and the technological skill level of its builders being readily apparent, this place has inspired a lot of speculation, and a lot of amateur historians and explorers love to check this place out. Now, the mainstream narrative is that the place was built around 1500 years ago by King Kashyapa I. And while a lot of that is backed up by historians, the local myths tend to talk about also the brother and sister that were born of a lion, half man, half lion, and the son had lion hands, and they were the original builders of the rock. And some of the myths attribute it even further, back into some of the very earliest gods in Southeast Asia itself. One thing is for certain is the engineering skill of the people that built the place is readily apparent, especially when it comes to water management. So let's take a look at Sigiriya, the Lion Rock. Hi, I'm Dan and welcome to Debunking. History says that King Kashyapa I was the original builder at Lion Rock. He was the son of a concubine and the king, and his brother, who was the legitimate heir to the throne, he kind of got in there, weaseled his way, kicked his brother out, forced him into exile, walled his dad up like Edgar Allan Poe style and let him die inside of a stuccoed wall, kind of cool, and then took over the region as the king. And his brother came back about 18 years later, and he knew that his brother was eventually going to come back, so he set up a fortress on Sigiriya. And at first this was a military outpost, but it slowly became a pleasure palace over the years, kind of degenerating. And then 18 years later, his brother did return with an army, and when they met on the battlefield, King Kashyapa I, his elephant kind of found a patch of mud, so he had to steer his elephant around it, and his troops mistook this changing of direction of the elephant for him retreating and abandoning him on the battlefield. So he fell on his own sword, drew his sword high in the air, rescabbarded it, and croaked on the ground. That left the area to the local Buddhists for the next few hundred years, and then it was just kind of forgotten to Western explorers and stuff, but held in the local memories as a sacred holy place. But there is talk of a god king who was the first to build on Sigiriya about a millennia before the time of Kashyapa I. And this tale begins in India. A prediction said that a princess was going to be kidnapped by a lion, and of course nobody liked that, but eventually she was kidnapped by the lion and gave birth to two children, a boy and a girl, and the boy was said to have the paws of a lion. Now, a giant boulder blocked the cave to where the lion hid his family, but when the boy became of age, he was capable of moving that megalith and was able to free his family. His name was Sinhabahu. The lion didn't give up, however, and destroyed the countryside searching for his captive family, but when he found them, Sinhabahu shot his father with an arrow and it ended the reign of the beast. Eventually the king had a son of his own, Vijaya, and Vijaya was a violent man and was not well liked in the community, so much that they wanted him put to death. But the king had him exiled instead, him and 700 of his followers, and they were all sent to Sri Lanka, where they presumably were the first people to settle there, according to history, and according to myth, were the people that originally settled and built on Sigiriya, the Lion Rock. Now, this story is steeped in symbolism. Not only does Sinhabahu called the Sri Lankan Oedipus and the fact that he slays his father, but it's not morally ambiguous in his case, but also he learned to move a megalith in order to come of age. It's got all the Graham Hancock fingerprints of the gods type stuff, basically, right? You've got this site that's got technology that's a little bit above everything else in the region. This site is technically above everything else in the region. It's attributed to this god king that goes way back into prehistory, and it gets all goofy with it moving the big rocks and stuff being incorporated into it. If you're into that sort of thing, this story kind of has it all. Those are the two main people attributed with the construction of Sigiriya according to myth. So let's go ahead and dig into the site itself. Upon approaching the site, the first thing you'll notice is the sheer size. The huge piece of granite the site is dominated by is impressive from miles away. Surrounding it is the water gardens, and this gives you a few clues as to the overall layout of the site. Symmetry is very important, and as is utilizing natural as well as man-made elements to create the site that mingles nature and human construction in a manner that can only be called artistic. The use of water at the site is actually one of the most amazing things that you'll find there. The fountains and storage and the different types of plumbing that are involved are so technically advanced that nothing else exists like it in the region. When the rainy season hits, the fountains will spout water, the pipes used to drive it utilizing not only gravity but more complicated types of plumbing. For instance, hydraulic jumps were frequently utilized, and that's when high-speed water hits a slower moving body of water and it makes the water kind of jump. That can be used to not only slow the water, but to gain elevation, and it's more advanced plumbing. It's a lot more than just hope water goes downhill. Walking past those gardens, you would eventually arrive at the base of the column. And on the way up the pillar of granite, several natural boulders are used to create foundations, now known as rock gardens. Small buildings were said to have sat here in the distant past, only these foundations remain. Further up we reach the gatehouse. The staircase up the rock is flanked by massive carvings of lion paws, obviously reminiscent of Sinabahu. Now some claim a lion's head was once carved on the rock as well. It seems there's no evidence for this, just local tradition. The gatehouse is on a plateau high above the trees below. It's really hard to put into context just how huge this is without taking a good look. Now the small staircase that leads up the side has a wall that was originally plastered and polished until it was reflective enough that you could see yourself in the wall. Despite not being covered in plaster at all and no longer casting any sort of reflection, it's still known as the mirror wall. Something that is already apparent to the explorer by this point is the incorporation of natural and artificial features to make the whole. This trend continues across the entire site, and it's remarkable that it's included in the infrastructure as well. Natural boulders are often seen positioned in a manner that is impressive, obviously incorporated into the site's art. And despite the top of the rock being terraced with pools and palaces and all different kinds of things, many natural features are still incorporated. One of the more impressive features of the site is the murals, these scantily clad women that are dancing all over the walls. So well preserved that some of the paintings look like they're almost new. Now they're said to be about 1,500 years old, but they look basically just a little faded. So amazing to have them so well preserved after all these times. Now they're done as a fashion that isn't seen anywhere else in the region, which is enigmatic in and of itself. That's not to say they're entirely unique, but the techniques used to produce them differ slightly from the norm of the area at the time, and as such little is known about them, including who the artist is, who they're said to portray, and exactly when they were made. Slowly fading over the years, and once the subject of some hoodlum throwing paint on them to deface them, the paintings won't be around for every future generation, but they are here for us today, and they are amazing. One thing that has protected them is there's a lot of bees that like to hide up in the cave, in the side of the cliff, right there where the paintings are. These same bees, they're known to be highly aggressive and pretty venomous. The honey from them is highly prized and harvested, but it's too tight of an area for them to actually efficiently harvest the honey, so the bees just basically act as a natural barrier for people to, be more vandals and try to destroy these paintings, which is kind of a cool little thing. Those with decent biblical knowledge might be thinking of Samson right about now. And finally we reach the top of the summit where the palace itself sat, and it's terraced in a manner that's reminiscent of Congo Bongo. Yeah, I'm old, sorry, but it was extremely well constructed despite the 8-bit appearance. It is one of the most highly regarded archaeological sites in Southeast Asia. The incorporation of natural features and the symmetry of the site are both very apparent to the careful observer. Several gardens once existed here, and the evidence of robust water management system, complete with decorative pools and fountains, are all over the place, but there's no way for them to have gotten that amount of water up here. The fountains no longer work, and the pools only hold a meager amount of water even in the rainy seasons. But at one time it seems that these were all alive and useful. How the water was brought up to such a height is unknown. What we do know is the palace itself was in use for about 18 years from Kashyapa I alone. So the water issue had to have been solved before he settled the area, or right afterwards at any rate. For him to have used it as a place to hold out against a potential siege, it doesn't make much sense that water would be a serious problem there, but it is. The amount of water needed just to support a palace with guards, servants, and their associated animals would be incredible. But you add to it the agriculture, gardens, pools, water fountains, and then all of a sudden you have a real mystery. Now, it's possible that there were large reservoirs constructed up there, or there's some big cisterns or something that we haven't found yet, but there's no evidence of anything like that. We have no idea how that much water was got to the top of that 600-foot rock. It's possible the rainfall was a lot greater in those days, but there's no evidence for that either, that none of the climate models show that it being enough greater for it to actually feed these kinds of fountains. But these things look like the ones that are down below that during the rainy season just vomit water. So it is pretty enigmatic as to how this all worked. But we do have another possibility, one that gets even further into myth. In local Buddhist mythology, the city of the gods is known as Alakamandava. 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 I can do this. And anyway, it was said to exist way up in the clouds, and so there's a lot of people that think that Sigiriya is Alamakandava. Hope I got that one right-ish. And anyway, there is a lot of overlap in the myths and in the legends that would imply that maybe this is the mythical city of the gods. If this is the case, and the site isn't just a place of occupation since the Stone Age, it's possible that the place is a place where this hypothetical lost civilization that Graham Hancock and his friends all believe existed after the Great Flood. We have an older god, sometimes said to be involved in the construction of the rock's first city. He's so old he shows up from China to India, all across Southeast Asian world. Known as Vaisravana, he's one of the 4 heavenly kings of Buddhism, and he's a god of war. He's known to just like whoop ass and take names, and he is all over Southeast Asia, from China to Korea, anywhere you go. Now, he is said to have built his home on Sumeru, the 5-tiered mountain that is central to Buddhist and Hindu cosmology, often equated with the world tree in the Western world metaphysical tradition. Now, some have said that Sigiriya is Sumeru, with the different tiers in the monolith being associated with the different tiers of spirituality. Now, it is a tempting idea. There is solid evidence of human occupation there going back a very long time, and we do have a lot of enigmatic waterworks in the site. Like I mentioned, the place is very well made and doesn't quite all add up. It seems to me that it's more likely that somebody had an answer to that water issues, and they made such complicated things, knew how to make hydraulic jumps, but didn't realize they weren't going to have enough water up there. That doesn't make much sense to me at all. So we are in kind of Graham Hancock's turf here, where the mystery does kind of line up with the myth, and well, who knows? Now, there's actually a lot of things that are possible here, because despite the site being extremely popular, it's heavily under-excavated, which is another reason that it invites so much speculation. We don't really have answers. There could be 12 inches of dirt between the answer of how they gathered all that water and us, but we don't know because it hasn't been dug into very much. So we do have a lot of tantalizing myths. We do have a lot of enigmatic waterworks and other construction features, but in particular, the way that the water was done just does not add up. And we have the way that the site is linked to the natural to the man-made, where it's extremely artistic. It was not just made for functionality, it was made as art, and it really shows it. If you look close, you'll see it. I'll post some links below where people talk about this sort of thing, all feng shui with it, right? But it really goes to town on that shit while making the place work, except for the water, which for some reason doesn't work now. So we have a true mystery, a link to the past 600 feet above us in the sky above Sri Lanka. It's pretty crazy. And, you know, I appreciate you guys watching. I think that this is one of the more mysterious sites. I want to thank my patrons for helping me out here. I got some fancy new lights and stuff. Hope I look a little easier on your eyeballs now. I know I'm still sexy as ever. But I also want to say thank you very much to you, the casual viewer, or you, the first-time viewer, watching this far. I really appreciate the support. I hope you enjoyed this. And, you know, there's a lot of different YouTube personalities that talk about this kind of stuff. And if you've enjoyed this one this far, maybe this is the kind of place for you. You might want to click some buttons down below, and I hope to see you next time.